Oregon and Washington are both chasing 5-star prospects and are both in good positions. What does the recruiting battle between these schools look like in the coming years? That and more on this Locked On College crossover edition of Locked On Ducks and Locked On Huskies.
You are Locked On College Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Yes, it is that time once again for a crossover edition of Locked On Ducks and Locked On Huskies. I'm Spencer McLaughlin. That is Roman Tomashoff. Thank you all for making this your first listen or your first view of the day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day and your number one source to stay up to date with your favorite team, whoever that may be. We'll have this mind-numbing debate that Roman's going to pester me with in the second segment, and we'll get some hoops talk on today's show. That is all coming up today. It's brought to you by our friends over at Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. So, Oregon fans are waiting for June to really explode. Messiah Hampton was step one. He committed on Friday. Ryder Lyons has been crystal balled to Oregon. Jett Washington, a 5-star safety, has been crystal balled to Oregon. But those are not the guys we shall discuss today because Washington's not in the fold for those players. But Washington going after 5-star players, Roman, that is, quite frankly, not an unheard of development, but it is a newer development from where I'm sitting in the last couple of years. Because I think as Washington fans know well, Kalen DeBoer looked at recruiting and was like, yeah, whatever.
Yeah, no, that's 100% accurate. No, Spencer, this is a really interesting conversation that you and I got to have on Locked On College Football as well for all the everydays out there. Make sure they go listen to that. But it's something where Washington was able to secure a very late visit from 5-star cornerback Brandon Arrington, and he's somebody who I'm curious to see how this battle is going to shape up. I felt like Texas A&M has been the other school that's in the mix here for a good long while. He just visited Alabama as well this past weekend, and I really do think it's going to come down to those three schools in some regard. I feel like he might end up at Oregon at this point in time, just the more that I just continue to read the tea leaves and see how things tend to be trending, where that's going to be a really solid secondary class. You look at Jedd Washington that you just talked about a second ago. I think that things are shaping up really, really well there, but the trade-off in this regard that I'm really curious about is somebody who just visited Oregon this past weekend is now coming up to Washington, is 4-star cornerback Davon Benjamin. And I kind of think, hey, one guy goes to Oregon, Why wouldn't the other one want to end up at Washington at this point?
Because if you go play with the other guy at Oregon, it just seems like a fun time. I'm just saying, I don't think it rains in Eugene as much as it does in Seattle.
That 20-point loss in the Rose Bowl seems like a really fun time.
Was that to Washington? I forgot.
No, but you guys do lose.
No, you guys are in the Sun Bowl. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right. Anyway, I did want to look at a big picture. Is Benjamin not a 5-star? I thought he...
No, he's like borderline. He's like top 50.
Oh, okay. Still a top 50 player. And Arrington's a top 10 player in the class who, could play both ways. Sure. Frankly, if I don't know all the details of Texas A&M's recruiting, but it's just popped in my head with regards to Arrington. If he wants to play both ways, that's going to be a lot tougher at Oregon because of the amount of receiving talent that is stacked in the room. I don't know how big of a priority it is for him to play both ways. Obviously, he's incredibly capable, but you'll have Decorian Moore on the team next year. Who knows if Evan Stewart comes back? You'll have Gatlin Bear, a 5-star, coming in for his first season of college football after a 2-year LDS mission. You've got Jeremiah McClellan in the room, Jeriad Dickey's. It's hard. It's hard, and I wonder if that factors into the recruitment. I'd, of course, take him even if he only wants to play or only winds up playing on one side of the ball. But you told me before we started, Roman, that you like Benjamin more than Arrington. Why is that?
So one of the reasons that I like Benjamin is I likened him to what Trent McDuffie was coming out of high school, just to, throw another Washington name out there from a couple of years ago, because he's somebody who is just so technically advanced right now. When you look at his feet, you look at just the way he plays the position, he has such a high level of understanding of it. It's very clear why Arrington is the higher ranked prospect is because he is an elite athlete. Like, he is breaking Noah Lyles records on the track. Like, that's, guy, yeah, dude, crazy track guy, which is fair. Which is completely fair. But I look at somebody like Benjamin and I think, I look at some of these prospects that are coming in around the country. Dijon Lee, just to reference another California cornerback who's down in Alabama. Like, those are the kinds of guys who can come in and play a lot as a freshman. That's not to say that Arrington couldn't, but I just think that who is a college coach going to see from day one and say, I really like just, the technique and some of the other guys that this guy does for one reason or another, where it's very clear that he's been coached up at a high level already and can come in and contribute right away. And there's not going to be this, massive jump from high school to college like there is for some other prospects. And I would lean Benjamin in that regard, just because you see all the things that he does at Oaks Christian, which is a phenomenal program. And you just think that, that guy can play pretty early on in his college career.
I wanted to extrapolate this out to the big picture recruiting angle between these two schools, because obviously plenty is made between what happens on the field every year. Because I think for any coach in any season, you can make the case this is their most important game. Like, it's the one that if you're going to lose all the other ones or have a bad year, if you just beat that team, then it's okay. Like, everything feels all right. Where do you see Washington's recruiting going? Because someone that I've talked about a lot on my show this offseason has been USC, with regards to kind of encroaching upon Oregon's dominance of West Coast recruiting that they've had in the last 6-7 years since Mario Cristobal took over in 2018. They've elevated. USC has underachieved. Washington has had some good classes, but then Kalen DeBoer didn't recruit a lot, and Jimmy Lake actually recruited. Yeah, Jimmy Lake actually recruited. Correct me if I'm wrong. Jimmy Lake was a better recruiter at Washington than Kalen DeBoer.
No, he was not.
Oh, okay. Really?
Yeah, we don't need to get into the whole 95th ranked class in 2022, because he just straight up did not care for the majority of that cycle.
Oh, okay. Well, regardless, the point I want you to get at is,
we're going somewhere with this.
Yeah, USC has shown that they can rise up and recruit at Oregon's level. Do you feel like Washington can do that?
So I don't think that they want to go that far with it. Where I think that
who wants talented players, man? That's for dweebs at Georgia and Texas.
Yeah, the dweebs that push them out after 2 years when they recruit a transfer guy to start over.
Yeah, we're gonna do that later. All right.
Oh yes, we are.
Yeah, stay on point. Nick Saban recruited a lot, but go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, again, different time, different era. But I look at it, and it's Washington. If you have a top 10 to 15 class every year, I think you're going to be really happy with that from the Washington perspective, because Jedd Fisch is very interested in recruiting at a high level. And I think that, when we look at, especially USC, to throw them into this mix as well, as the three powers on the West Coast, you look at that and you just see that, okay, yeah, they're going to continue to encroach on everything that they want at this point in time, if they're going to keep doing whatever it is that they're doing down there and paying recruits $20,000 a month to stay committed, as the story goes. But
was that ever confirmed, or was that just a rumor?
I think it was a rumor, but that's why I said as the story goes.
Okay. Yeah. Just making sure.
But it's one of those things where if Washington is at that level every single year, where if you're able to keep the top players in Washington home, I look at 2027 and think about Tavita Nonu, a high-ranked defensive tackle, after grabbing another defensive lineman from the state of Washington that Oregon wanted, that Ohio State wanted, and Derek Coleman-Brusa, and you're still able to keep some premier talent on the West Coast at, just away from USC, away from Oregon. I was going to say at Washington, but Cody Green was playing in California for the last couple of years. Getting a five-star offensive tackle from there, getting a Davon Benjamin to come up to Washington would be a key part of this as well. And then as Washington continues to push for some of the other top players in California, like four-star wide receiver Daniel Odom, who's committed to Oklahoma, is a name to keep an eye on. Four-star wide receiver Madden Williams, his teammate at St. John Bosco, is committed to Texas A&M. If Washington is able to continue to pull players like that out of California on a year in and year out basis and get, let's say, 4 or 5 players in the top 25 to 30, I think that that's something that Husky fans will be happy with as they continue to try to expand their recruiting footprint, which is going quite well, by the way. If you're able to go into Georgia and very quickly become a top 3 contender for 5-star edge rusher Tristan Gibbons, Washington can recruit at a high level. I don't think it needs to be a top 5 to 7 class every single year for this program to find success, but it certainly is helpful.
Yeah, having good players, regardless of where they come from. It turns out it's helpful. It turns out that that's still important to have better players than the guys on the other side. I think last year's matchup between these two teams was kind of emblematic of what I'm getting at here. Just point it out. Just point out. Anyway, so just really quick. I feel like Oregon's ceiling, absolute ceiling. One day they could pull in the number one class in the country. I think,
Sure.
Being in a 3 to 5 year window, having 3 to 4 top 5 classes, I think is kind of where they're striving to be. For me, I see Oregon as a floor team for recruiting, top 10. Like they should be in the top 10 every single year. Where do you feel like Washington's floor and ceiling is at with Jedd Fisch?
The floor with the Jedd Fisch era should be 25. I think the ceiling is somewhere in the 7 to 10 range. If a few things fall right here and there, depending on the relationships and how early they get in with some guys, quite frankly, is the best way to put it. I think that somewhere between 7 and 10 is the absolute ceiling.
Okay, all right. There's nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong. You can do a lot of things with that. But it's all about the top 5 classes we know. Anyway, so in the next segment, I'm going to entertain Roman's ridiculousness because I'm just such a nice guy.
Yeah, that's what that is.
First, this episode brought to you by Gametime. There's nothing like the NBA playoffs. The intensity of Tyrese Halliburton being really good. The buzzer beaters, mostly by Tyrese Halliburton. The fans losing their minds at whatever Tyrese Halliburton has done. It's the kind of atmosphere you have to experience live. And this year's matchups have already been delivering. And if you want in, Gametime makes it fast and easy to get seats, even for the biggest playoff games. Prices on the app actually drop the closer it gets to tip-off. And with killer last-minute deals, panoramic seat views, and no surprise fees, which is my favorite part, Gametime is a total game changer. So, I've used Gametime on multiple occasions myself. It was a great process. I got a great deal. Tickets were on my phone. Easy money. Just like that. That's why you got to check out Gametime. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. So, Roman, speaking of Gametime, by the way, there was an issue getting my credential for the Big Ten championship game, so I bought a ticket with Gametime. Maybe you'll have the opportunity to do that one day, but we'll never know.
Yeah, the national championship credential I had really doesn't.
Yeah, that
doesn't
was the
look
past.
anything.
We're in a new conference now. Anything that happened before that is ancient history. You see, we're all operating on what happened this past season. So I'm going to give you the floor to lay out. I don't even know where this came from. I don't know who started it. I just know that I come across this idea a lot, that Oregon doesn't develop its own players, that they can't recruit high school kids and keep them. They just recruit them and then replace them all with transfers. And I would just like to hear what exactly this perspective is or where it came from. So you go ahead as someone who at least dips his toe into the water in that particular camp.
So let's what's the best way to put it? Let's talk about the offensive line that Oregon has put together for this season.
Mm-hmm.
Right, where you go out and you get players like Isaiah World, which is awesome. He's a really good player. I think he's going to do very, very well. Mm-hmm. But you look at that and it's, hey, haven't you guys been recruiting really well, in air quotes, along the offensive line for the last 3, 4, 5 years? Or at least that's the expectation under Dan Lanning when you're pulling in a top 5 class every year. You can correct me if I'm wrong there.
They have recruited the offensive line well, yes.
So where are those players? Why did you have to go get Emmanuel Pregnant?
One of them is starting at center, and we're hoping will come back for a 4th year, but might not because he might be too good to go to the NFL and played as a true freshman. One of them just got drafted in the 1st round. One of them came up from the FCS ranks and got drafted in the 5th round.
There we go. Okay.
5th round in Johnny Cornelius. One guy who started up until this past year. Every year under Dan Lanning was a pretty lowly rated 3-star recruit. I think he was like outside the top 500 players nationally in Marcus Harper. So anyway, you were wondering where those guys are. They are around.
That wasn't my question. My question is, where are they right? Where are the players that you said to continue to recruit? Where are they right now? Why did
many of them are on the roster, and some of them have transferred out.
Sure, but isn't the whole point to year in and year out get these players that you were developing from the high school ranks through? Like that's the whole point of this. That is the big question here. Every single year, you're supposed to be like, oh no, we have this really good player waiting in the wings at 3 separate positions along the offensive line. Again, this is just the example we're using here because we can go down the whole wide receiver debate if you really want, that you and I had through text a couple of weeks ago, just to pull back the curtain a little bit there. But it's one of those things where if you claim that, yeah, we are developing at all these players that we're recruiting from a top 5 class every single year, wouldn't the majority of your offensive line then be made up of those players?
Why is it limited to why does it have to be limited to the offensive line?
Well, no,
why are you going down this one particular position group?
I'm going down this one particular position group because Oregon invested in, correct me if I'm wrong, 4 starters along the offensive line.
Yes, that is correct, and I think that's a legitimate. I think, and by the way, I think that offensive line is going to be really good because the guy they have anchoring it down in the middle. And by the way, we all know, I'm sure you know this as well. No one uses just 5 offensive linemen in a particular season. Of the 8 that I expect to see the field at some point this year, I think 4 of them are going to be transfers and 4 of them are going to be high school recruits. Last year, that ratio was different.
So then let's talk about that to keep this offensive line metaphor here in play.
By all means.
Let's talk about Washington's offensive line for the 2023 season.
Mm-hmm.
Of the
23 season, you didn't want to talk about the 2024 Washington offensive line?
No, I really don't. I don't think anybody does.
Yeah, I do. I liked that unit. 10 sacks was really something. That was really something.
I'm marking that off on Oregon bingo, by the way. Shout out to the Duke father. Fantastic. Yeah, that's just a fantastic Twitter.
Oregon bingo. That's good. I like that.
So, Spencer, just pop quiz off the top of your head, of the 8 players that were the primary rotation along that offensive line, how many of them were transfer acquisitions by Washington?
Last year?
No, that 23 Joe Moore Award winning offensive line.
Oh, the 23? I think there were 2. 1 or 2.
0.
Zero.
No, zero. They were all recruited from the high school ranks. This is the point where it's not that one is necessarily better than the other, but it's more of just the optics of the situation, if you will. Where, you talk about all these wide receivers a minute ago. Let's jump over to that. You talk about all these wide receivers that, we're producing wide receivers at such a high rate. You haven't had one picked in the first round since 1972.
It's been a position that's been elevated a lot because it used to be guys that were not NFL caliber prospects, and now they've started bringing in those sorts of players. But no, I didn't expect him to suddenly be taken in the first round right away. I thought Troy Franklin could have gone. There were some mocks that had him there, and he fell to the 4th round. The NFL was probably right about that.
That's the point. Right, but that's the point, right? Where it's, this guy comes
is that one player got drafted a little bit later than maybe he was supposed to?
Later is not a little bit later. That's not a little bit later, but it's one of these things where you look at it. And
he was mocked in the first by a couple of different guys. So I thought it was
7th round. This is something that happens every year at Oregon, where all of a sudden it becomes a trend at a certain point when it's, this guy was mocked in the first round. Why did he go in the 7th? This guy was mocked in the first round. Why did he go in the 4th?
Is your contention that Oregon is at that point that we've hit the point where it's a trend?
No, I'm just saying that it's getting closer than you might think. But I think that's something where you should certainly look at it. Because it's one of those things where, we're producing NFL pick after NFL pick after NFL pick, and they either go in the 4th round or they're transfers. Outside of Josh Collins.
Okay, hold on.
I can't think of another one.
Hold on. A couple of points. First of all, Oregon just had more players drafted this past year than they ever have before.
Yeah,
than they ever have in the history of Oregon football. Why is that a bad thing? I'll get to where the players came from. I'll get to where the players came from in a moment. But why is that suddenly a bad thing if they weren't all recruited by Oregon out of high school? Why is it punitive against the Ducks, but not as much as other people, of course? Why is it punitive to adapt to the modern landscape and build the best roster that you can that just beat Washington by 28 points and sacked the quarterback 10 times?
You're not necessarily hearing my entire argument. That's the argument for the general landscape. My argument in particular is if you want to sell the NFL and you want to sell development, Christian Gonzalez is a fantastic example in my opinion, where he's somebody who, when he got to Oregon, was already mocked as a first-round pick. It's great that he stayed at that level and was able to get drafted in the first round, but it's something where if all of the first-round picks that you are bringing in are from other programs, like Derek Harmon, for example, who I think is a phenomenal player. I think Derek Harmon is an excellent player.
Yeah, he was awesome.
That doesn't necessarily sell the, we're going to get you to the NFL. It's no, you're taking guys that are already developed to a certain extent in one area or another. It depends on which player you want to get in the particulars with. If you're saying, they got all these players drafted, How many of those players that got drafted were recruited by Oregon out of high school and then selected by the NFL?
If a guy comes in and transfers to Oregon,
You're not answering the question.
What?
Answer the question though.
Well, I was answering the premise of the question. I'd have to. I will tally it up in my head once we have a break because I don't want to. I don't want to get the answer wrong. But to the point that you are trying to make here, Roman, a couple of things. First of all, if a guy comes over to Oregon and still has the opportunity when he's previously projected being a first-round pick and then continues to be a first-round pick, why is that a knock on the program, number one? And number two, in what world, if you have this grave concern about Oregon and developing players or whatnot, why can you not develop transfers? Where was Tez Johnson getting drafted?
I'm not arguing that. I'm not arguing you can't develop transfers because then you can throw that right back at Washington and say Michael Penix.
Yes.
Like I'm not going to sit here and argue that. But my point is when these guys who are already very highly touted transfers, which is why I started this with Isaiah World, where if let's say Isaiah World does go on and become a first round pick, it's look at what Oregon did for him. It's wait, he was a top 5 player in the transfer portal. Like, isn't that kind of what's expected of him to end up to continue to go on?
Well, yeah, but he's still looking to go to a place. He's clearly not NFL ready because I'm pretty sure. I don't think he has to be in college right now. I believe he's already played at least 3 years of college football. I will double check that because it might not be the case, but I don't think he has to be in college football right now. And so if he's looking to go to a place that will elevate him to give him the sort of platform he needs, why is that a bad thing for Oregon to take him and put him in the NFL draft and say, hey, look at what you can accomplish here? Like, why would you not want to showcase high school recruits and transfer portal players of the highest caliber? You can come here and go to the NFL. What is wrong with that?
It's the high school angle of that. When you talk about the true development aspect of all of this, it's you're showcasing to high schoolers. It's, hey, we really like you. We're going to, put all our resources into getting you with the photo shoots and whatever else it is they're doing. I don't understand that theme.
Yeah, because Washington notably doesn't do photo shoots.
No, that's not the point. That is not the point. You're missing the point again. I was asking specifically what the theme of those photo shoots were because I didn't understand that. But
I didn't understand the hazmat suit either, honestly.
If
that was the one you're thinking of, I saw that and I was like, I don't know. Like, okay, I remember it. Like, if that's all you're trying to. By the way, World does not have to be in college right now. He was class of 2021, so this will be his fifth year of college football.
But this is more the point on that regard. When you talking about development and saying we are going to take you as a high school prospect, push you through our program. By the time you are done with this program, you are going to be ready for the NFL. What kind of message does that send? And this is the overarching point, in my opinion, from the arguments that our two fan bases seem to have on Twitter on an hourly basis, where it's, what kind of message does that send? If, we're going to go and we're going to sell all these 5-star recruits every single year that you and I just talked about. And then all of a sudden, 2 years later, if it's, hey, we don't think you're 100% ready to play right now. We're not going to let you get better on the field. We're going to just get somebody to take your spot. I'm not arguing that that's the worst way to build a roster. That's not what I'm saying here. But what I am saying is, what kind of message does that send if you're going to continue to sell these guys year in and year out and pour all these resources into it just for somebody else to take their spot? I don't think that sends the best message, is my point.
High school recruits clearly seem to disagree with that particular assessment as Oregon continues to recruit at a top 5-10 level in the last several years.
Again, not my argument, because especially when we look at the way Oregon recruits, which is certainly not a conversation we have time for on this show. But if you look at that way, they are always going to get recruits. That is not something that I have ever argued or will argue. But it's the argument that you and I wanted this segment turned into, and of course it goes off the rails because we always knew that it would when we planned this, it's one of those things where you look at it and you just say, again, is there one surefire way to build a roster and find success in the world of college football? No, certainly not. But there are certain things that you can look at and say, I don't know, it feels like it's a little bit more sustainable to do something this way or to do something that way. And I think that
you should build most of your roster. Okay, hold on. We need to take a break. We need to take a break. We will indeed finish this conversation and then close with some hoops talk. And I have an answer to Roman's question. Okay, so first point, Roman. Of the 10 Oregon draft picks, 4 of them were originally Oregon high school recruits from many moons ago. Everybody else was a transfer at some point in time.
Great. Okay. So Washington also had 10 draft picks in 2024. 8 of those players were recruited by UW out of the high school ranks. That is the point here, where it's that.
So what's the threshold?
I would say it has to be somewhere in the 60% range.
Why?
Because I think that's what you want at least the majority of your roster to be built through the high school ranks. Am I wrong? Because you just said
a majority of your roster, yes. A majority of your starters, it entirely depends. Because the other thing that you have to look is, as I've brought up, is the developing transfers is something that I don't think gets talked about a ton because everyone assumes you bring in a transfer and he's just ready to play. Well, Dante Moore is a transfer. Anybody look at him the same way that you look at Dylan Gabriel? No, absolutely not. By the way, Dylan Gabriel, great example of what I'm talking about here. He got taken in the 3rd round, which is higher than I thought. I thought he'd be like a 5th round pick, maybe 6th. But the reason he came to Oregon is because he went to the NFL and they gave him an undrafted free agent grade. Then he came back, he goes to Oregon, and he's drafted in the 3rd round. And we're going to pretend like there's a lack of development to sell the players. Like being able to sell both high school and being able to sell high school and portal recruits, I think is incredibly valuable. That's just the way I see it, to build the best roster you can. Of Oregon's 10 draft picks this past year, I think there was one who came to Oregon and was ready to be drafted in the spot that he was, and that's Derek Harmon. I think that guy was going to be a 1st-round pick, no matter whether he'd stayed at Michigan State or whether he came to Oregon, and obviously came to the Ducks because he wanted to compete for a championship. But Jordan Birch was seen mostly as a bust when he was at South Carolina. Jamari Caldwell's probably the other one. Jamari Caldwell went in the 3rd round. He probably still would have gone in the 3rd round. So 2 of those guys, I think we're going to be taken as high as they were. Everybody else, kind of up in the air.
But I think that Oregon did an okay job with Jordan Birch, where you just kind of you found a way to utilize him to the best of his ability. I don't think they let him play inside as much as they probably should have at South Carolina. There are a couple of things going on with that one that I was quite curious with, but it's not like you're hearing my point a little better, which, I'm glad for that. But it's one of those things where if you look at the sample size where it's every single year, 40% of the guys that were getting drafted are players we recruit out of high school. That's not something that I think that any program should be proud of, not just an Oregon thing, because you can just look at that year in and year out and say, oh, wait, if I go there's a 60% chance that, if I'm ready for the
That's
NFL,
a 1-year sample size, though. I'd have to compile 10 years worth of data of Oregon draft picks to perpetuate or to lay a claim to, there's a 60% chance if you're a high school recruit that you won't get, like the number of guys that are going to get drafted coming out of high school that go play college football at Oregon, Washington, or anywhere else is still exceptionally low. And even guys that transfer, the chance you go get drafted is still exceptionally low.
I think the biggest point, since you and I do want to talk basketball, we're both very excited.
We do.
I think the biggest point here is not only that there is not one successful way to build a roster, which is something you and I can absolutely agree on, but I think that there's something to be said for when you are taking these guys year in and year out, whether you might agree that they're ready to play or not. A lot of these guys that are coming in with these high-ranking transfer portal grades, Mekhi Hughes being another great example. He's played 2 years at Tulane. Like, they are going to be expected to start and expected to contribute at a very, very high level right away. Whether you like it or not, whether that is fair or not, that is the expectation around college football, around the national media, not URI, who cover our individual teams. I think that is something that, you are going to have.
Some of us do a little more than that on the side, but I'm just.
Check out
that watch next box. Get that watch next box down there.
But it's one of those things where I think that is a really, really big part of this, where I lost my train of thought just a little bit there as you wanted to do your shameless self-work, which I greatly respect. But it's something that I look at, and I think that there is certainly something to be said there, where a lot of people are going to place these fair or not expectations. Like, go read any Pro Football Focus article about Mekhi Hughes this offseason. It's this guy's the second coming. This guy's going to be a top 3 running back in the Big Ten right away. Like, those are the kinds of things that It might take him a couple games to get used to it because he played at Tulane for the last 2 years. It's not that I don't think he's a good player, but those are the expectations coming in around every single Oregon transfer every single year. And I think
that's where you're wrong.
Okay, I'm exaggerating a little bit there.
Yes, you're exaggerating a lot of it. I talk about every transfer that comes through. I've been talking about Malik Benson for months here on this show, who I could easily gas up and say this guy is ready to explode, realizes JUCO All-American talent, and I looked at him all offseason. My everydayers could tell you and say, yeah, I don't know, he might be a 300-400 yard guy now that Evan Stewart's not there. Before that, maybe he catches a couple I don't know. Like he's kind of a mystery box.
Right, but if you want to cherry pick examples like that, you called me out for doing that earlier, by the way.
Yeah.
But if you want to cherry pick examples like that, you can do that with every program as well. But you can look at it and you can say that there are just a very, very high amount of expectations, around a lot of these Oregon transfers that come in on a year in, year out basis. And like Dylan Tiedemann being another one who we didn't get to, where like the expectations around that guy are sky high. Mm-hmm. And what does that say to, like, obviously they just got a crystal ball for Jedd Washington, but what does that say to some of these guys that are already on the roster where it's, oh, hey, that guy's got 2 years of eligibility remaining. And
that you better be ready to compete. And then if you want to compete, if you don't think, hold on, if you don't think, and the message is you better be ready to compete. Number one, we want to have as much talent as we possibly can on the roster. Number two, it's not like there's only one safety spot on the team. Number three, if you don't believe that you're good enough, we believe that you are good enough to compete with this guy, or take his spot one day when he moves on. But if you don't think you are, hey, go right ahead. But also, Oregon is one of the only programs in the country that has never lost a starter to the transfer portal under their current head coach. A starter has never left. You were
building for last season. You were building for that. I think that's a big part of that. You were building for that 2024 championship run, which didn't turn out very well, by the way. But one of the other things.
Thanks for the reminder. I forgot.
Hey, you're welcome. But it's one of those other things where you can look at that and you can say, like, yeah, you want to breed that competition atmosphere. Jedd Fisch talks about that every single time he gets in front of a microphone. But it's also one of those things where it's, hey, we don't necessarily believe in you enough that we think you're ready to take a big jump forward into the rotation or a starter. So we're going to go get Dylan Tiedemann because we want him to do that job. I think that's something that certainly resonates in the same light. Does it not?
I think the recruiting results indicate otherwise, that clearly it doesn't, because fans or you or other people have tried to spin this narrative. Well, they're going to get tired of it. And yet, here we are with Oregon back in the fold for a bunch of 5-star recruits and still landing elite prospects. We've been like this conversation has gone on for the last couple of years, and yet here we are. I'm in the camp of build the best possible roster you can, however you need to get the players. If Oregon had leaned more into development last year, they still would have been really good. But they would not have been as good if they didn't bring in Derek Harmon, if they didn't bring in Dylan Gabriel, if they didn't bring in just keep going down the list. Jabbar Muhammad, even. You remember him vaguely?
I do. Yeah, very well. At the end of the day, look, it's all about success. Sorry, this is the last thing I want to say here. At the end of the day, it is all about success in college football. And it's why I keep coming back to the point of there is no one just surefire gospel way to build a roster. But it just seems like in the general world of college football, there are certain avenues that are going to start revealing themselves as more sustainable than others. And I think that one thing that you and I are both very curious about is how is that going to shape up for both the programs that we cover? Whether, it be, okay, yeah, you want it, there's going to be a certain number, like I said earlier, of 80 to 85% being high school instead of transfers. Like, we don't know. We don't know where this is going. And I think that is such a big part of this debate between our two fan bases, which is, as we said, just something to behold.
I'm sure it won't be raging in the comments at all of this show on our channels. While we've still got like 60 to 90 seconds or so, this went a little longer than we were planning, but hey, that's the way the cookie crumbles. I like where Oregon basketball is at. I will say Washington just got the guy that I really wanted Oregon to get in Desmond Claude from USC. He had, I think, visited or he'd heard from Oregon, and this is a 16-point-a-game scorer of the Trojans. I won't lie, Roman. I was not thrilled. I saw TJ Bamba 2.0 and said, that's what this Oregon roster needs. It's still a tournament roster. When you can, I don't know exactly how the starting five will work out, but if you have Jackson Shellstad, KJ Evans, Nate Biddle back for a fifth year, okay, you should go to the NCAA tournament. Everything else, kind of questions. Claude would have been one less question mark, but Washington, the last place team in the Big Ten from this past year, in case you forgot that, is not going to be last place next year.
No, certainly not. I expect this team to be a top 5 in the Big Ten at the very worst at this point in time because of the significant investment that they made through the transfer portal, which doing that in basketball is a very different discussion from doing that in football.
Yes, then it's totally okay. It's totally cool, right?
Yeah, totally fine.
There's no qualms, no questions with the program, nothing. Just remember, when Washington does it, it's okay. When Oregon does it, it's a sign of real issues within the department.
Certainly not what's going on here. Also, I'm a little ashamed. Here's my shameless plug for you, that you didn't just ask me because all my insiders knew what was going on with Desmond Claw's recruitment for that entire period of time. You can check that out down in the description below on the Locked On Huskies page. But this is something where it's not just Desmond Claude. It's Wesley Yates. It's Kwamari Peterson from East Tennessee State. It's Jacob Ognisevich bringing him in from Lipscomb, getting Zoom Diallo and Frank Kepnong back. You have depth that you didn't have last year on top of top-end talent. Yeah, Frank Kepnong. Love that. I love watching him play, man.
I miss Frank Kepnong. He's the perfect backup center. He's perfect.
He's going to start the season. If he stays healthy, I think he'll be a really big impact on the defensive end. Getting Lathan Somerville from Rutgers is a really important part of backing him up as well. And then bringing in a couple of really high-end freshmen like JJ Mandequit, and then a guy from Germany and Hans Steinbach, who just looks absolutely incredible in the Bundesliga playoffs. There's so much talent on this roster that making it back to the NCAA tournament seems like the bare minimum at this point in time.
Yeah. Well, Washington's got a soccer player and a guy I describe as a backup center starting this year, so they're up and coming.
Whoa! Right? What a shot! What a just knockout shot from you.
If we go any longer, I think Zach is going to fire us both. So that's Roman Tomashoff for Locked On Huskies. I'm Spencer McLaughlin, Locked On Ducks. This has been a Locked On College crossover. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time. And until then, hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.